Hey, Bob, just testing. This is Jennifer and Richard. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Richard, is that you at the table?
Yes.
You have on a sport coat. Am I underdressed? Oh, sorry.
Kenmore City Council is now in session. First item on the agenda is a study session, Public Works Facility Update presented by Public Works Operations Manager Jennifer Gordon, Environmental Services Manager Richard Sawyer, and Wagner Architects and Planners. Ms. Gordon.
Good evening, Council. It's almost weird because this actually feels like a real meeting. There's people here, great to see people here, and great to see all of you here. Tonight, we're here to discuss the Public Works facility, maintenance facility update. And we're gonna ask the council to provide us with some direction at the end of the conversation. So we're gonna talk about kind of the project goals and that direction and kind of next steps, what we can bring back to the council next. With that, before I move on, Bob was introduced, but Bob Wagner is our architect, and he is following along remotely, so he's there on the screen. So tonight we want to discuss the overall project goals. Anastasia, is the presentation going to be on the screen or?
Yes, just cue me in whenever you're ready.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, stand by.
Sorry, I thought you were going to just do it from the start. There we go. So tonight we're going to discuss overall project goals, meeting the climate action plan goals, preliminary site layout options. We have two separate options to show you, and also talk about certifications. As far as our overall project goals, we're going to talk about our current near-term needs and as well as our long-term needs for the operation. The program needs, we want to be providing flexibility for long-term future operations. Public Works has been in-house for almost 4 years now. It's hard to believe it's been 4 years, but when we first started planning for the Public Works maintenance facility, we didn't have a lot of data. We were taking over from the city of Lake Forest Park, who had been providing our Public Works operation services since the city incorporated. And so we were basing it on, the little data that we had and making a lot of best guesses. So what we have been able to do in the last 4 years is really dig into the program needs and refine those needs and understanding what the operation will look like. We're going to be looking at building a facility that's going to accommodate the needs of the future operations, including additional staff, additional equipment and vehicles, and taking over new programs. If you just take a look at the big projects we have going on right now, under the walkways and waterways projects, we've got big park improvements coming online. We've got big sidewalk improvements coming online. And we just finished the West Sammamish Bridge project. So just right now, just looking at those few big projects that we have that are all new and requiring a higher level of service. Are we going to stop building projects once those are all done? I don't think so. I think we're going to be continuing to provide, the community with new parks projects, new street projects, new sidewalk projects. All of those things require operations to take care of those for the term of however long that asset belongs to the city. And then lastly, meeting the climate action plan goals that we just adopted this last year. And Richard's going to talk about kind of the key points of the climate action plan.
Thank you. Can you go to the next slide? So earlier this year in spring, staff concluded about an 18-month long process to develop a climate action plan, which council adopted spring of this year. And in that plan, there were several key actions that were approved that would impact this project. So again, kind of since that 2018 assessment we did that Jennifer mentioned, this plan has a kind of a big impact on how that affects how this facility should be designed and constructed. And so I've pulled out some of those key actions that were adopted in the climate action plan, and I'm going to highlight a few of those here. So actually, it's the very first or second action in the plan is to construct new city buildings that are energy efficient and carbon neutral. And with working with Bob and some of the consultants that we brought on the team to design this facility, one of the first questions that came up was, what did the city and council mean by carbon neutral? And as we've been investigating this, we've learned that there's essentially two leading industry standards when you look at carbon neutral, and that's your operational carbon. So your day-to-day use of the facility, you're basically only consuming the resources that you are renewing as you consume. So electricity in is net zero, it equals electricity out. Your water and day-to-day operations of the crews doing, your fleet, the heating of the building, all of that, you achieve a net operational zero carbon emission. But another part of this puzzle is embodied carbon. So to be carbon neutral, you could also look at the full life cycle of this facility, all the way from the extraction of the raw materials to construct this facility, to manufacture those raw materials into the components you need to build the facility, the construction itself of the facility, then the operational period that facility is used. And then you also have the repair and replacement of components of that facility over time. Then you have the demolition, the disposal, and then the recycling of what you can to reduce your carbon needs for this facility that can potentially be moved onto the construction of that next facility that can use the recycled materials. So this is really that cradle to grave. You're looking at embodied carbon and operational carbon. So I just wanted to highlight that, and we're going to come back to this at the end of our presentation to ask for some direction on how this council wants to proceed and how staff apply carbon neutrality and the design and construction of this facility and future facilities that the city builds. Some other actions in the climate action plan that are relevant for this. Ensuring that critical facilities have backup power. So this would definitely be a critical facility that we don't want to stop working when the power goes out. And then a few of these following points, the electrification of the city's fleet also is crucial. If we're going to be relying on electric fleet, both our vehicles and equipment, at some point in the near future, we're going to need to ensure that we're able to power up that entire fleet in the event that we lose power. So it's not really just as simple as building a diesel generator now and flipping a switch and go and have to design and implement a more sophisticated facility in order to manage this future electric fleet. Expanding public electric vehicle charging stations. So both for the public and the staff, this facility will have charging stations
Okay, I think we're back. We're at the mercy of technology from time to time.
All right. I will continue where I left off. So prioritizing carbon sequestration on public land. So we've got a nice opportunity here to retain some existing tree and forest canopy and meet that goal. And this also ties into the next one very nicely, is that this is kind of a broad action, but part of this is to preserve existing trees and when necessary, replace removed trees. But we're not only looking at the number of the trees, but ensure that there's equivalent carbon sequestration potential as well. So this is also important when we get into the next topic, because you'll notice that this site that we've acquired has a large number of significant trees on it that really provide us a great opportunity to sequester carbon on this site, particularly with one of the options over the other. So that'll be coming back here in the conversation as we discuss the next topic of layouts. But so that kind of wraps up the main climate action elements applicable to this project. And so before we jump into the site layout, happy to kind of take questions on this section, or we can jump into the next one.
Questions? Not seeing any so far.
Next, we're going to talk about the preliminary site layout options. So tonight we've got two options to show you. As you have seen in previous presentations and the current agenda bill, the site that we have is currently comprised of 3 parcels, and that totals 2.8 acres. We're going to show you first option A, and that utilizes the entire 2.8 acre site, providing 2 acres of usable space for the operations. Second option is option B, and it only utilizes 2.1 acres, providing 1.5 acres of usable area for the operation. I did want to point out that when we were, starting out, that, like I talked about, the early program needs assessment that we did was where we came up with that needed 1.5 acres of minimum area to provide us with adequate space to have the operation on the site. So I just wanted to kind of remind you where we got that 1.5 acres from. Here is an aerial of the entire site. So the entire site is outlined in red here, showing that option A would use that entire site, and then option B would be have that 0.7 acres left over. So the hashed out area would be left over.
Bob, can we check in with you one more time? Can you hear us okay?
I can hear you now, but that's the first thing I've heard in a long time.
Oh, okay, so we're going to go ahead and proceed. Richard, please tell me what slide we're on.
One more. There we go. Okay, we'll start over since the audience online didn't hear what we said at the beginning. With option A, we are looking at a space that can provide a very long-term future operations. So the idea would be that this site would be flexible enough to, look way, much farther out into the future, providing the operational needs to the community. There's a much higher probability of meeting the climate action goals with the larger site. The one big obvious is, keeping the significant trees. The larger site provides us with the ability to have a much larger solar panel system that could go on all of the admin and shop buildings. We've got a lot more space to provide above ground cisterns to use reclaimed water, reuse that water for irrigation or gray water use for toilets and that kind of thing. This plan saves most of the existing trees. Next slide. The larger space also allows us to have a two-story construction or a two-story building construction, providing a better fit for the neighborhood. We are going to, use that site built into the slope, trying to, keep the building low to keep that, in the character with the neighborhood. We would use mostly wood construction to keep the carbon footprint low. This allows for much more space. We can use higher walls in a two-story building to provide much larger windows, to provide daylighting for workspace. Allows for future expansion of the administrative building and improves operational use of the site. It's less constricting and has a much more open layout that will make it easier for just the day-to-day operations of the site. Next slide. The site A will also, we believe, have lower operational costs, and that's due to just being way more efficient. The way that the buildings are laid out, we can have different operational buildings. And let me give you an example of the shop building. So maybe you have one shop building that's just used for storage of supplies and equipment that doesn't need to be heated. So maybe there's one building that's on the site that is just strictly storage and doesn't need to be heated. So having that building be its own standalone building makes it much more efficient, because if we're having one larger shop building and we have to divide it up into sections, it makes that, mechanically speaking, with the HVAC and that kind of thing, it makes it much less efficient. It allows for plenty of space for parking on the site. We're estimating that this option would be 4 to 5% less to construct. And at the end of the day, there would be no land to surplus in this option. Next slide.
I'm going to now just run through some of these conceptual site B options, and probably a little quicker because a lot of it is just the same points, but it's just going to be the counterpoint that Jen's already explained. But so this option, what we've done is we've pushed it over as to a small footprint as we could on the west side of the property. And one thing I'm not sure if we mentioned, but the west side of the property was more ideal because we would be bordered on the west side against the same zoning already with the school property on the west, the north, and then it would also move us furthest away as we could from the existing single-family residential to the east. So with this option, obviously we would be more dense. It would meet our current near-term kind of operational goals, but not necessarily, it would eliminate our ability to expand in the future. It's going to be much more challenging to meet climate action goals on this site because in order to fit into the space, we will need to remove many trees and kind of move vegetation around to just make the smaller site work. It will significantly reduce our area for solar arrays. Above ground cisterns would no longer be an option, but we could still look at underground vaults, which is kind of when you saw on the option A that it was actually cheaper. These are the kinds of things that start coming with to start digging, either going up or going down, which increases some of those construction costs. And again, I already mentioned we'd have to remove several trees in order to make the smaller footprint work. Next slide. We'd need to go vertical, so going to 3 stories starts kind of increasing your construction cost, as well as that neighborhood feel that we were talking about. We'd kind of start sticking up and being more visible vertically, whereas in option A, we're kind of using the topography and we're pretty well hidden into the hillside. And we're going to be using more steel, increasing our carbon footprint, less window space, future expansion. Basically, the footprint we kind of get in here is what we will have indefinitely. And then kind of for those reasons that Jen was already mentioned, it would be a less efficient operational use of the site. Next slide. And then kind of tying in with that previous one, also with the higher operational costs. Again, both operational and admin would just be more vertical in larger single buildings for operations and admin use. We would have to install structured parking, so basically a 2-level parking garage in order to fit all the parking needs that we would have, which is kind of another one of those higher costs. We're leaving the estimate about 4 to 5% more, 4 to 5% more expensive to construct this. But again, then the goal of this one was we're on that 1.5 acre usable area, leaving a land surplus of about 0.7 acres. And then we just have those same kind of comparisons side by side on the next 2 slides, if there are any questions. But that concludes kind of this section. So we can either move on to the next topic, or if there's any questions, we're happy to take those.
Councilmember Marshall.
It was 4 to 5%. So site, the option A would be 4 to 5% less. So it would be 4 to 5% less than B. We don't have a total construction cost right now, just because this is a really big project and it doesn't really make sense for us to try to get true costs for both options. And so just trying to narrow down what option that the council would like us to go with, and then we can dive deeper into cost estimates and getting more true costs. Yes, just based on the type of construction we're talking about. So it's mostly has to do with the building the admin, going vertical with the admin building, and then having to build a parking structure to accommodate all the vehicles. Those are the 2 major factors.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, thank you for this. It feels like option B is being presented as, kind of a straw man. There's so, many, it feels like option B is being presented as a straw man, that, there's so many kind of negatives about it, the way it's presented. And yet, where we started with this was the need for 1.5 acres. And, now we're talking about double that, basically 2.8. I guess I'm just uncomfortable with how this is being presented. I don't know if there's any middle ground. Part of the way we discussed the purchase of this property was the idea that we might be able to sell back the part that we didn't need. And now we're talking about not doing that. If it's zoned R6, is there a little portion that, is it all or nothing, I guess is the question, which is the way it's kind of presented here. That's maybe my question. Is there any middle ground? Yeah.
So I guess I'll start with this, and then Richard, if you have anything to add, you can go for it. I guess first I wonder, go back to looking at some of the previous sites that we were looking at purchasing. And we did highlight this in the agenda, Bill, but I think the first site we looked at was, how many acres was the first site? I believe was almost 6 acres. And then the next one with the existing warehouse building on that, I think it was 2.1 acres was the actual size of the full property, but we did identify that we needed that minimum of 1.5. So just going back, that it wasn't just 1.5 acres that we were looking at to purchase. So I wanted to highlight that. And then we didn't have the climate action plan, up until this year. So I think having that climate action plan kind of steered us in the direction of what we're presenting tonight, because prior to that, that really wouldn't have been, as much of a factor in the direction that we go. So the intention was not to say this, this is the negative, this is B is negative, A is positive, but it is kind of turned into that just based on the climate action plan.
One small follow-up, it's not, just that I forgot to ask. The structured parking is presented as only an option B, but it seems like, for climate and for neighborhood and all sorts of reasons, we might want to have not have surface parking, which is what option A would have. So I guess I was hoping maybe you could just speak to that one point also.
Well, I think, and Bob, this might be, if you have any, want to hop in, but one of the nice things about spreading out is we actually have more area to, we're looking at a lot of like the solar as one of our primary ways of gaining energy. So with a lot of this parking, we can actually use that as well to cover. So like with the vehicle spread out, we would actually have some high carport style bays that would be providing us additional solar array area. That's why with, I think option A has almost twice as much square foot that we can get the solar energy, which is what we're really going to be relying on for some of that energy demand. And then,
Do you want me to speak up on any of these issues?
Yeah, if you had anything else to add about the parking.
Yeah, well, the reason we went to structured parking is you just cannot make it fit with surface parking. The only way to provide all of the program requirements is to build that little parking garage. If there's a concern that surface parking is inconsistent with the way you want the site to feel, we can always add structured parking to the other program approach on A, but it will add quite a bit of cost to the project. we weren't asked to approach be a straw man. We were asked to come up with a good solution for fitting everything into a reduced area. And the only way to do that was to change the construction type and the structural solution to both parking and the administration building. And the administration building gets bigger in footprint because now you have to provide stairways and duplicate some uses on every floor. And on a two-story building, as an option A, most people are going to use one big set of stairs. On a three-story option, you're going to use the elevator all the time. So your operating costs and the efficiency and the comfort of using that building are going to be a lot different. On option A, I think Jennifer mentioned that it could be expanded. Whereas on a multi-story building, you're not going to ever expand up. We've done several facilities for other jurisdictions, and just the nature of city operations, public works operations, is that they change in the future, and they tend to grow regularly. Regulatory requirements increase, community expectations increase, and so you end up adding activities and staff and equipment. So it's prudent to have that ability to expand, even if you don't need it right away. And then when you look at a specific site and the area that's required, you not only look at the functional area, which I think had been identified as 1.5 acres originally when they were looking for a site, but you have to look at what the zoning code requires in terms of open space set aside. Here we have, I think, a 30% requirement in open space. So that kind of increases the overall size of the site that you can use or that you have to maintain as part of the project, and it reduces how much is left over if we go with option B. I can't think of anything else to say.
I think that I just wanted to add a couple things that I kind of forgot about was with option A, I did want to remind the council, they have seen this conceptual drawing before, but I wanted to highlight that we did want to make sure to have a very large buffer between our site and the residential properties next to us. So that is a twice, I believe twice the size that is required. I think that's a 30-foot buffer planted there between our site and the residential properties on site A. And then there's one more thing. Now I lost my train of thought here.
Can I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Councilmember Shrubnik, you'd asked about the residual amount of land in option B. My understanding is that you would be able to sell that off if you went with option B, the 0.7 acres.
Right, I think that was clear. I guess what I was wondering is if there was a middle ground,
Oh.
but yeah.
Councilmember Baker.
Oh, hold on. Councilmember Baker, please use your microphone.
On that, I thought that the initial discussion showed option A having more available land left over than option B. Yet in the presentation, it said option A had no additional land left over and option B had 0.7 acres. So I'm a little confused.
I don't really know what I don't know what the past options were labeled, but I don't know.
I mean, in this presentation, we've provided kind of two concepts. And so A utilizes the entire site. There's no surplus land, and then option B would have a surplus of 0.7 acres.
I thought that first slide showed
We can bring that
option A
back
having
up.
something, but
Well, there is something reserved in option A for future growth.
okay.
So the option A footprint being horizontal can extend into that. In option B, there is no additional space within the boundaries of
Okay.
what's shown, and you're not going to be able to expand those buildings.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Deputy Mayor.
I have I think a couple of questions. A lot have been answered, and the main question I was wondering about, and maybe it would be worthwhile to bring up the option A slide of its visual, because to our community, it's our understanding that our community is very concerned about tree canopy, and with the larger footprint, if you could demonstrate where the trees are saved in option A over option B, just to kind of give a visual.
Okay. I think Anastasia is going to work on putting that up.
Maybe you want that one.
Yeah. There we go. So as you can see in the very center of the property, you can see where we've drawn in the existing trees. So we've avoided trying to remove any of those large cedar trees in the center and built the driveway around it. So that like area is almost like a dividing line of the property, so that all of those trees would be saved. And then there are some significant trees there on the bottom of the covered bin space. So all of the symbols that look like kind of stars are those evergreen trees that are all on the site. There's also some larger trees towards the rear end. I don't know if this is showing. I believe there's some deciduous trees that would be along the north border between our site and the Kenmore Middle School site. Then there's also much more, that 30-foot buffer that I was speaking to earlier. There's a lot more, plantings going back in the site. We wouldn't have the room to have that buffer in there with the smaller site.
And would that buffer be, as we're looking at it, on the right-hand side? Is
That's correct.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So
That
it
looks
would be the
pretty
minimum.
substantial.
Yeah. So what is the minimum? The minimum I think is 15.
I think
Was
so. I think we
yeah.
have 30.
And I do have another question. It's related to the smaller property, option B, and the potential of selling the the remaining property. My understanding, and I just want to know if I'm interpreting this correctly, it feels like the way I'm understanding the construction costs and operational costs, but even just on construction cost, the benefit of selling, building on the smaller property and selling the residual might be a wash. It doesn't feel like what I'm understanding is the potential of us making money on that property with the expense of building what we need for our community's public workshop might not benefit. I mean, it looks to me like the larger property with the solar arrays and the additional trees and the above ground cisterns, which are less expensive to build, that is the more economical route, ironically, because I think we thought that looking at the smaller property, we would potentially be able to sell that property and bring money back into the city. But what I heard was potentially long-term operational costs will be a much greater benefit than selling that property. I just want to check to see if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yes, you're understanding that correctly. Well, we can't provide a exact number of what it would be if we were to sell that property versus, keeping the entire site, simply based on, we can't just say, oh, we purchased these properties for this amount of money, and then it's not necessarily going to be exactly the same as if, oh, let's go back out and sell the 0.7 acres that we have. It's just going to be based on what are what is the use going to be? What, what's going to be on that property? So it's kind of just like really up in the air, and it depends on what that property would be used for.
Thank you. I did have one more question, but I think it went away when I realized that with the larger property, there will be overhead, kind of covering.
Like a carport.
Carport. I was going to
covering-
use the word carport. Carports with solar panels, but I was curious about the use of pervious surfaces for parking. Is that something those areas, or is that considered, or would it even be benefit necessary since it's covered?
The covered areas wouldn't
Yeah.
really be a benefit, but I mean, we would still have, lots of open areas, and we would do geotechnical evaluation of the soils to see if, permeable pavements would work there. And if they did, we would utilize them.
Thank you.
I should point out that in the operational yard, where you have heavy equipment, pervious pavers are very difficult. And you want to collect the rainwater running through that yard and put it through oil water separators. Because you want to clean it, there'll be oil and gas dripping down there. So we've been thinking that we would put pervious pavers where you have light traffic and sidewalks.
Thank you very much for highlighting that. That didn't occur to me, so thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. I really appreciate what's presented with primary site option A, and returning the older growth trees, and the additional solar array panels, and being able to produce more solar energy for an energy efficient building, let alone adding energy to a green infrastructure. That's important. What I really would rather also see with a building design for the administrative building is parking underneath the building, and to have some of that other area, keep that planned other area for the joint the electric charge stations and whatnot for public and our government use. But I'd rather see a parking garage underneath the building, thinking about site growth and whatnot. And to the point, ensuring a public building has an elevator. I was a little disturbed to hear that a 2-story building for a public building, a government building, wouldn't be accessible. He said there would be stairs, but he
didn't
said
mean to
there
say
would
that.
be a cost of an elevator with B and not A.
No,
I
it would
did-
still have an elevator. I think what
I
Bob
was a little disturbed.
I think what he was referring to is that would be more, the norm for people to use the elevator if you had a 3-story building. But while we don't have a actual design here, what I believe the intent is, and Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the intent for the upper floor is to be more of an admin area, office type space, and the bottom floor would be more of a crew space, locker rooms, crew area to, all their planning, but, it's a little bit more of it's not your typical office area. And so that's kind of the difference between the 2 floors. And so I don't know what kind of space would be available for parking, but
The reason to this point is we're also talking about a building that would be open to public possible use, educational use, whatnot, and consulting rooms or having meeting room space. It would be nice to have greater parking support underneath the building, and while retaining whatever surface area we have, as planned. I'm thinking about just a growth mindset and not overburdening a space when those situations collide. We are a medium-sized city, only growing more dense, considering North Shore's birthography rates. And so I'm concerned about that, as well as future already planned growth. So that is part of my concern. The other concern I have is why there's a plan for a generator on site should the site go down or lack of power. I'm also thinking about the winter months. It'd be nice to see a secondary generator that stores, power, kind of like a gremlin generator, for example, that stores power for a building to use during, the other times of the day, during low sunlight months, where you instead would not have to tap into, the electric power energy. So I'm wondering about that. Is there any plan to store and produce your own power for later months versus, riding over to a power bill that's expected, year after year during the winter months or whatever?
So I think that we're just not quite to that level of detail
Yeah.
at this point in time. I think that we would be looking at whatever options are available to us and, recommend whatever kind of fits in the budget. But yeah, we just don't have that kind of detail. We're just kind of highlighting the different features that are a possibility. And if, a larger site would lend itself to these possibilities versus the possibilities of the smaller site and that kind of things. Did you want to add anything or?
I mean, yeah, we have started having those conversations, and what you bring up is a valid point. And it's one of the things that make this project kind of unique and challenging for a carbon neutral facility is that a lot of the consultants that we've worked with, they've built office buildings, for instance, where the use of the building is happening during the day when you're getting sunlight. So their cars are there getting charged. They're using their equipment, during the sunlight, and then they typically leave kind of at the end of the day. For this facility, the fleet is going to be leaving and doing their work during the prime time that the solar panels could be doing their job, and then they're going to be returning depleted, needing to be charged up when, the end of the day, and like you said, so these challenges, so I mean, we're aware of these challenges, and we're going to, yes, think of, there's probably going to be some sophisticated battery systems that we'll need to develop in order to account for that, and the backup generators will need to be able to accommodate our energy load, and all this stuff needs to be modeled. So what is our energy demand? And then we design to that to account for it, and then we'll have a better answer for you after we kind of look at the whole picture. But yeah, there's some challenges unique to trying to do, electrify a facility of this nature and make it carbon neutral.
And then adding, a garage under a building like this does add cost, but it also does, especially if you do it below ground, it helps kind of preserve the neighborhood, right? Especially with screening, if we're thinking about that way. But I don't see any reason why we can't go a little bit smaller than option A and be able to have some of the remnant property be, part of the R6 available zoning for, multifamily development or missing middle. I see potential for growth. I see underused potential. And if we want to maximize our space, what little of it we have in Kenmore, I think we have to think about our growth with a growth mindset and our future generations. So thank you.
Okay, I've got a few questions here. I was a little surprised to see 57 or 58 parking spaces in both of the plans. Are those purely for staff, or are those for staff and fleet, a mix of both?
A mix of both. And for public parking, if we're providing, a community use, there would be that also.
Yeah, I still don't fully understand the idea of a public use of a public works facility. And as we're facing an increasing budget, I would very much like us to look at all the ways we can to save a few dollars here or there, because from when we first started talking about this 5 years ago, the price on this has gotten surprisingly high. And I think a public works building should be a public works building, and I don't see a reason for there to be public access. I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me personally. And if it could save some money, I would be fine doing away with that part of it. We have plenty of meeting rooms and things here and across the street in the library. And then is there a ballpark idea of what the cost difference might be between the two definitions of carbon neutral?
Yeah, I mean, some of the very preliminary cost estimating we've done with Bob and some of the other consultants suggest probably be in the 20-25% increase range.
Okay.
And Bob, you can jump in too, but I think some of the big ticket items are when you start doing solar arrays, that's expensive, but then that trickles down. The entire facility has much more complicated electrical system, mechanical system. You have to do just the way you construct the building you requires more efficient types of construction and materials, which are more costly. The heating systems get more costly, and then you kind of have to design around those, like Jen was mentioning earlier, with the option where we can spread out a little bit more. We're able to segregate and be more efficient with how we use the energy in the building, because really the building energy use is about 60% of the entire city's emissions. So that's where you can really get the most bang for your buck. I don't know if did I miss any other of the big ticket items on that, Bob?
Can I, Mayor, were you asking about the cost difference between the two definitions of carbon neutral?
Yes, because that was one of the questions that they had.
Right.
That they're seeking direction from council was which of these two definitions you want to pick. And
oh, okay. So I was just talking about the construction of the facility itself was about that much. I don't know if we have a good estimate on the cost difference on the definition of neutral, but obviously going with the full life cycle of being carbon neutral, there's no way to build something without having a carbon footprint. So we would try and utilize construction techniques and materials that have smaller carbon footprints, which tend to be a little bit more premium and expensive, but then we would have to offset all the rest of that. So that's where, like, retaining the trees on the site allow us, I mean, that's some free carbon sequestration we would have over the next 75 years of this facility that we could capitalize on and minimize the need to find offset. But we would still need to basically, you have to go out and find a forest or restore a forest. So we would need to go outside the area of this facility and try and get some carbon sequestration credit somewhere.
okay.
Mayor, may I go back
course.
to that first question you had about the parking area?
Of course.
What I did want to say is that this wouldn't necessarily need to be built all at this point in time at the beginning. So while this would be more of like a master plan, if you will, with the parking, that would not be needed upfront, but that the plan would be for the future growth. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that we wouldn't have to build all that parking right now, and we could leave it, natural space until the time comes where we did need to have that parking. But so I don't know if that.
I mean, how many workers do we have parking, on a day-to-day basis now, and how many vehicles do we have roughly?
Gosh, trying to remember exactly. Bob had some of those numbers. I don't have those with me today, but I can definitely provide them. I mean, current today's numbers, I want to say like around 30 with.
Yeah, and you have to, it's, not necessarily just vehicles, but we've got trailers that do specific things. They need to be parked somewhere. They might not be used every day. And then we've got backhoes. Some point in the future, unfortunately, we may need to have a Vector truck. So it's just thinking ahead and making sure that this site can accommodate and handle all of these potential uses that we're going to need in addition to what we have now. You know, we've got traffic boards that need to be parked and
Street sweeper.
street
we've got,
sweeper.
Snow and ice equipment.
So it's not just, you know, you're like, well, we only have a dozen workers. Isn't that a dozen trucks? You got
Right.
there's some specialized vehicles, and then there's just an assortment of trailers and equipment that need to be stored. And some of those, when you see the operational buildings, we can't just leave out in the winter time. So that's why it just starts, there's a high space demand for just public works operations to take care of the equipment.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Is there any way to ballpark just roughly what you think the 4 to 5% savings is on building option A versus B, just roughly? Because I don't know, I find it very hard, especially with something this big ticket, to kind of make a decision without some at least rough financial estimates, because I think that has to factor into what we're doing. And so I'm really trying to figure out, like, what is the difference in the construction between the two, you know, just ballpark. And then also, you know, what is the ballpark for what 0.7 acres goes for on the private market? I mean, I think these are both important factors when we're making these decisions. So I'd really like some more information around that personally.
I mean, so again, you're talking the cost difference when you're looking at the implementing the climate carbon neutral.
No, now I'm talking about option A or option B as far as the layout of the smaller versus the larger site plans.
Oh, okay.
I think we do have some high level costs, because I don't want to commit to the cost because
Yeah,
we just
thank you.
don't have enough detail at this point in time. But I think we're around 5 million. Was the difference?
5 million is 4 to 5% of the
Well,
construction
no,
cost.
no,
I'm
that
sorry.
was-
That was for option A versus option B.
That was more the climate, you know,
No,
just
that was,
doing.
yeah, that was climate.
Yeah.
That was
more
hitting
like
all your
the-
climate action goals, not hitting all your climate action goals. I
it
think
was
the
more
difference
like in a
between A and
million.
B is more like a million.
Yeah, a million.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
As for the land, if you just took what you sold the property for, how much, and then prorated that for the 0.7 acres, the math is 1.4 million. But remember, it's all getting zoned public, semi-public. So to sell the land, you need to rezone it back to something. And what you rezoned it back to would influence your sale price.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Do we have any idea kind of what the operational costs, the added operational costs are of using the smaller kind of constrained plan of option B? Because that was mentioned as one of the factors.
No, we don't have those costs at this point because there's a lot of data that that's a big,
I had to
I guess,
ask, but
assessment.
And there's a lot of choices to be made still, so.
that's
Yeah,
fair.
I mean, really, that was one of the driving factors that brought us back to you to ask these few questions was, you know, we're working with Bob and some other consultants, and when you start having too many what ifs, so we can go, you know, what is the energy demand for option A versus option B? Well, it's like, well, kind of like, well, what's your carbon goals? And then if you're going this way, it just starts branching off very quickly, and running these energy models and cost models can be very costly and time consuming. So that's why we're trying to just figure out if we can narrow down a direction that council would like to go, then we can start getting into these more expensive energy models.
I'd like to reiterate something that Jennifer brought up earlier, that we don't have to build everything in the first phase, but you can do that with option A. And option B, it's much more difficult because it's hard to phase a parking garage or a multi-story building.
That's a good point. And then has any, the trees that would be saved under option A, have we taken a look to see how viable, healthy they are, just generally speaking?
We have not done an
Okay.
arborist assessment, but
Okay.
from afar right now, they look pretty darn healthy.
Councilmember Baker?
I think it just depends on, again, on the elements that are actually built in the project.
Councilmember Baker, is your microphone on?
Those are expensive, so I'm trying to figure out how many years it's gonna take for the payback.
And I guess, I mean, without any real specifics on the site, I don't know, Bob, did they just like, if you've got X square feet of this versus then this many square feet of facility, have we even gotten that far?
The
Of
only
potential payback?
The only place we look at that is the idea of on the solar panels, how much they might cost and when you might get a payback on that. If you're running solar panels during the day when you've got sun, you can, and you don't use all that power, you can sell it back to the utility. And then you can buy that power back at night when you don't have solar power. But it all has to work out in terms of how much capacity you have for generating it versus how much it costs to provide it. But the single biggest cost difference between the sustainable approach and the unsustainable approach, that's maybe not the right term, is the cost of the solar panels. But they're the only way that you have a chance of meeting a net carbon operational zero project.
I guess I would also be interested in, we have solar panels on City Hall, and I would like to know basically how much revenue is generated, or is any revenue generated at all from those solar panels on the roof?
I'll have to come back to you with the numbers, but we used to get, for the first 10 years, we got a incentive payment from PSC, and that was approximately $1,200 a year that we would get for having the solar system here at City Hall. But whatever we produce just, goes back into the grid.
Thank you.
I should also mention there's a good chance that the federal climate action, or whatever they call that program, it's going to spend a lot of money on infrastructure, may be providing some cash benefits for public agencies to install solar panels. They're providing evidently tax benefits for private organizations, but all the rules haven't been worked out.
Well, and I would add that there's a lot of opportunity for grants and incentives with, the different systems that would, qualify under the climate action plan.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. In fact, you just hit the nail on the head of what I was wanting to address, which is that there are many federal grants right now available under the infrastructure bill. As well as the other 40 billion that cities can apply directly to the federal government on different green new initiatives or infrastructure improvements. So I think that the pieces of the design and project development like this have great potential to come out possibly flush and clean. We just have to do our work, right?
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
I think I was just going to talk about the same thing, or ask about the same thing about the potential for grants. And, it's hard to, I want to ask, would it be I'm trying to phrase this as a question rather than a statement, but is my understanding correct that it would be hard to estimate the potential benefits of building, say, carbon neutral with certifications at this point, not knowing what sort of grants and things that we might be able to get back potentially? I do actually have a question after this.
Okay, so you actually mentioned something about certifications, and I know we put that in the agenda bill. We could go through that quickly to let you know what we're looking for as far as the certifications are concerned, because that is a price factor to consider.
Yeah, and
Anastasia, could you go to, let's see,
I think that's slide 18.
thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Yes.
because we have advertised a regular meeting at 7, we would have the opportunity to open that and then add this as an additional part of the agenda since it's a regular meeting, if we could do that and just start the regular meeting.
Sure.
Thank you.
So do that under agenda approval? And circle back
Correct,
to this?
correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to adjourn the special meeting, calling the regular meeting to order. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember File,
Present.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Here.
Deputy Mayor O'Kane,
Present.
Councilmember Baker,
Present.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Councilmember Kugler,
Present.
Mayor Herbig,
Here.
all present.
Would you all please stand and join me in the flag salute? All right, next on the agenda is agenda approval. The chair would entertain a motion to add the study session to be the next item in our in the agenda. I'm wanting to add this study session into the agenda of the regular meeting so we can continue this discussion. We do, but we need to finish this discussion too.
So moved.
Seconded.
All right.
Councilmember File.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then we need to actually approve the agenda. Unless there's any objection, the agenda will stand approved as amended. The agenda stands approved. Ms. Gordon?
So we'll just continue on.
Yes, please.
Okay.
yeah, I can get through the last topic we were going to discuss, as Councilmember O'Kane kind of mentioned, was certifications. So with green buildings, there's many certification programs out there. And we've kind of provided 2 main categories, which kind of include sustainable building certifications. So those are the ones that, you know, we're probably familiar with, LEED. So there's different levels of LEED certification that you can get, which are kind of a design.
18, sorry, slide 18.
Oh. Thank you.
Perfect.
So more of a kind of a building design. They provide guidelines on how to design and construct a facility, and then you can get points for a variety of things. So the LEED program, for instance, will have different categories where a portion will go towards climate change, a portion through human health, water resources, et cetera. And then you can get various levels of certification. Another program would be the Living Future, kind of the living building certification. Some of you may have heard of. Again, it's kind of a design point-based system that you can attain different levels of certification. And then you can kind of get more specific certifications that build on these. So LEED has 0 carbon and 0 energy. The Living Future certification has kind of similar goals. And what these are actually performance-based certifications. So they usually include some very complicated, intensive modeling. I think they have minimum 12-month performance period. So after the facility is fully operational and in use, they'll follow up and make sure that they're actually meeting the design criteria. And then you can kind of obtain these higher levels of certification for 0 carbon and 0 energy. And, you know, our team, we've had a lot of discussion on kind of the pros and cons of getting these certifications, but LEED, which I think we're more familiar with, and chatting with Bob and our consultants, for a facility of this size, you know, you're starting at about a $200,000 price tag just to start evaluating and doing LEED. And then these other, if you wanted to add on some of these zero carbon and zero energy type things, you would, that price would start going up at there. So, but we just wanted to bring this up and then have a conversation if there were any strong desires for certification from council.
So Richard, what I think I'm hearing you say is that you could still be net carbon neutral and not have these certifications. And you could demonstrate that you'd be net carbon neutral. But there is some benefit to having these certifications, but there's work to go with it and a price tag to go with it as well. But even if you didn't use these certifications, you could still declare the building net carbon neutral.
Correct. And then I think when we get to the last part of our report here, that's essentially, and talking with Bob and some of the consultants, that seems to be a popular option that many of their clients are taking, where they're actually following the LEED checklist, the living building checklist. They're doing the energy modeling, but they're just, I think they're trying to save some funds and not get the plaque at the end of it that they can put on the wall. So something to consider.
Councilmember
I
Shrubnik.
appreciate that
Sorry.
explanation. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, this might fit with it. Did I think I hear somebody say that the only way to get to the zero carbon for this building is to go with option A? Did I hear that correctly?
Well, it just is, it's much, we're going to have a much higher chance of success of being able to implement the climate action plan. I mean, we're going to do our best with either option to implement the climate action plan. I mean, council adopted that document, so we're viewing that as our direction. So
I think at the end of the day, you can always, mitigate. So just kind of depends if it's off-site and, that kind of thing.
Well, but we're talking about operational zero. So I mean, you can't
Well,
mitigate. How would you mitigate that? I don't know. I understand that.
Well, so if we cut down all the trees, for instance, we would want to go plant enough trees to make up for that lost carbon sequestration. So you kind of, I know it sounds.
I mean, we might want to look outside the facility for solar. We might want to do a project where we do solar farms outside the area of this project and get more energy somewhere else and back into the grid. So, I mean, there are options. It's just going to be, we'll have to start thinking more outside the box with less area to work with.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you. I just wanted to share some of my thoughts because I know that you need, staff direction, and most of the council members, I think, asked a lot of the questions that I had wondered about. So I think while we might be able to save some land and sell it back and recoup some of the funds that we've put forth to buying the property, that really it's probably in our best interest to meet the long-term needs for public works and for our city. Property is only going to get more expensive. So we know if we need to expand or grow, we're only going to be able to build up or find property elsewhere, which will be difficult and expensive. I like option A also partially because when neighbors talked about us moving into the neighborhood, they were very concerned about heights, as you know, like the form is really important. Visibility of the building was really important to them. So whatever we can do to minimize that, I think is important. Obviously, we want it to be cost effective. And I like option 2 in terms of carbon neutrality, but without any specific numbers, it's really hard to say, like, will we go with all options? I think that for me, we need to get a little bit more detail, knowing that I prefer like option A that's been laid out. We need more detail, I feel like, to decide like which of those directions we're going to go with.
I think if we left here with just knowing at least what conceptual layout that council would like us to pursue, that would focus up and we can get a lot more detailed and come back and provide some clear answers.
Speaking for myself, I finding myself agreeing with Councilmember Kugler here. I think option A does make probably the most sense in the long term. I do want to see us, I mean, we have to meet our own climate action plan goals. We passed it. We can't not meet that in the next facility we're building. Excuse me. So I do want to see us, I apologize. I do want to see us meet those. At the same time, I do really want us to take a very, to really examine every expenditure we're making here and make sure that what we're spending our money on is to build a good public works, you know, that we're building what we need, but being as prudent as we can with the taxpayer funds on this. We have, as I mentioned earlier, you know, it sounds like we are, this is a much higher item than what we were discussing when we first started this discussion 4 or 5 years ago. And to some level, that's to be expected. But also, I really think that at this point, especially with the economy where it is, and with some of the other capital costs that the city is taking on, I really think we need to be just as judicious as we can and really carefully examine this. And also, I don't think it's worth paying $200,000 for a plaque at the end of the day. It's nice to say your building is LEED certified. It's not necessary. We don't need, personally at least, I don't need the ego stroke when I'm talking to other council members in other cities about our fancy public works. I'm happy to tell them it's carbon neutral and go on from there instead of saying it's LEED certified. So that's where I am personally. Deputy Mayor.
And are we in comments or discuss? So I tend to agree with what Councilmember Kugler and the mayor have just said. And I'd like to share that it's pretty exciting to see these plans, this first substantial project plan being presented to us in alignment with our climate action goals. And as a council, we have an obligation to our community to be looking towards our future. This is more than dollars and cents. This is about the future of our planet and leading and choosing conscious decisions. Where can we invest in our community? Where can we save trees, provide power, right? The solar energy that we don't use does go back into the grid. So it is utilized in a way that is more substantial than a check back to the city. I think that I'm in a complete alignment. I don't think we need to obtain the certifications, but building to them is incredibly important. Operational and embodied carbon, I think, is also important. Layout A, I see the benefits of it in so many ways. In particular, I liked what was raised about building in a phased manner. When you come back again, I think showing us what the essentials that need to be built in this first phase to meet the needs of our public works operations is incredibly important, because we can build to that and then start expanding out as needed and check our expenses on things like parking. I like the covered parking with the solar panels. Personally, I think it's great. But I also know that we have to be mindful of their expenses, but how we choose to do that, I think we can get very creative about while building an optimal facility. And there is a need for leadership in construction and sharing the potential for how someone can build a public works facility or other facilities. So I personally support the educational uses of this building, because more like this is incredibly important today. When we invest in the climate, it goes way beyond dollars and cents. This is a long-term thing that is our council's highest priority, and our community, as we've worked with our members of the community and had events just like our salmon event, Stream Fest this weekend. Our community cares about the environment, so our decisions need to keep this in mind. So thank you so much for the considered plans that you brought forward. Bob, this is really exciting stuff. I'm thankful that we are working with you, with your experience, to bring forward these concepts and ideas that we have the potential to be building towards. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. So thank you for everything you've done. I really appreciate all you brought for us today and in the past. I am pro option A, and I am for the support of certification. And why? Certification goals and a plan to try to have certification does open us to the opportunity of receiving more grants, whether they're state grants, county grants, or federal grants. It's important, especially a living building. Everything living building is key and renewable. I love that the site will collect water and have gray water reuse. That's important that we are being sustainable. And I love that there will be public and private power charging stations. That's good for our community. And education is good for our community. So it's about time we've moved ahead. I'm ready to call the vote.
I don't believe we're having any official votes. We're just giving general
We're
direction.
just giving general direction.
I
We
mean, that's
could
usually how we handle things.
sometimes.
Does anybody else want to comment? Otherwise, we may actually have to go down each of these and give a yes or no. Okay, well, it sounds like we probably should go through the three decision points then really quickly.
Actually,
Yeah, Councilor Marshall.
Your Honor, I remember Mr. Sawyer said that if we just gave our decision on the plan, then that might guide some of their decision making and they come back to us. And I was going to ask that in light of all the folks who are here tonight.
Yeah, I was going
Expedite
to.
things.
Oh, sorry. So from what I heard, I was going to suggest providing direction on the conceptual layout option, and then as Councilmember Marshall said, we can then come back and provide a better answer on the operational and embodied carbon question.
Yep.
So I can modify that first direction to just
Right.
provide direction on the layout.
So can I get a thumbs up, a thumbs down for option A on the layout? I think you've got direction.
Thank you.
So you have what you need right now?
What's up?
Do you have what you need
I believe so.
tonight? Okay,
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is a presentation introducing new staff. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Honor. We recently had two new employees join our team. Justin L. and Charlie Parks are here, and I'd like both Jennifer and Richard, who they report to, provide the introduction.
Charlie's with
Justin.
us virtually.
Okay.
Here he is. He's on the screen.
I can start with Charlie Parks. So as you may or not be aware, we lost one of our environmental service techs, Ashley Edelman, in the end of July. So we've hired Charlie Parks to replace her position. And the last few years, he's been working for a private geotechnical consultant. And so he brings some awesome geotech and geology expertise to our team and will be a great help doing our surface water inspections and all that fun stuff. So yeah, so I don't know, Charlie Parks, you want to say anything else?
Yeah, no, you pretty much, I've only been with the city now for 2 weeks, so I'm still definitely settling in, but yeah, I've come from a background in sort of environmental and geotechnical consulting, a little bit of surface water, drinking water inspection for Seattle Public Utilities. So yeah, I'm just really looking forward to settling in.
I think one of the fun things is he was for several years also firefighter, so forest firefighter.
Yep, did a total of 7 summers of firefighting in college for the state.
All right, well, it's nice to have you on. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, and I would like to introduce Justin L. As you may or may not know, again, we lost our street and surface water maintenance supervisor back in believe it was February. So it's been a long time coming. I'm very excited to have Justin on the team. He comes to us with lots of experiences with the city of Woodinville for 15 years. And another cool fun fact is he actually worked for the city of Lake Forest Park during incorporation of Kenmore. So he was actually technically one of our first employees. So welcome, Justin. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. If not, here goes. Thank you, council, for having me here this evening. I am grateful for this career path. My past and present goals have led me back here, and it's exciting to see how the growth of the community and the city has been in the last 20 years. I mean, for me, I've lived in Shoreline, Lake Forest Park area, and coming back. I live in Snohomish County now, and just to come back into this area, just lots of vibrant growth. And what we're doing here as a city is really exciting, and I appreciate that, and looking forward to serving the community. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. I want to, on behalf of the council, welcome Justin and Charlie into the city's ranks. We appreciate it. We look forward to your work, and thank you for joining us. All right, next on the agenda is public comment. We welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage or dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. We will hear from our on-site guests first, followed by our virtual guests. If you're online, please use the raise hand feature now if you wish to speak. All guests must address comments to the mayor and city council. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we can confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name and city of residence for the record. Keep your comments to the allotted time. We will not split your time with others or reset your time except by express permission of the presiding officer. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or the clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for taking the time to express your comments. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a large group with us today. For those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. We're going to take our public comments in this order, and I am at the mercy of your penmanship. Janie Gifford, followed by John King, Andre Gifford, Gear Natland, Chris Olson, Serenity Dillaway, Quinn Wyatt, Laura Lata is the first batch. So Janie, go ahead and approach the podium. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. It sounds like you're deputizing your husband to speak.
I'm second on the list. I'm Andre Giffard. I am a resident of the Up Lake neighborhood, and the reason I'm here is I just found out about this rezoning initiative.
Could we get your name for the record? Sorry.
My name is Andre Giffard.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
And so I just found out about this middle housing initiative and the rezoning that's looking to take place on this. I'm honestly surprised I haven't heard anything about it until now. I have deep concerns about it. I've been a resident of the Up Lake neighborhood now for about 5 years. And the reason why I purchased that home was specifically because it was single family zoning. And that is very important to myself and my family. And I have some real concerns about where I think the city may be looking to go with this whole thing on the middle housing initiative. I think there's some other alternatives there that need to be looked at, such as some aspects around ADUs and other sorts of alternatives, rather than taking the entire residential community, of single family housing in the city of Kenmore and zoning this for this multiple housing initiative. I'm deeply disturbed by this. I live on an entire hillside of people that are like-minded, who also still know nothing about this initiative at all. And I'm just very, very concerned, and to the point where I feel that potentially the city council and others involved who are looking to make this executive decision aren't necessarily following the will of the people or the desires of the population of the city of Kenmore. I did take a look at just in a hurry before I came. There's a site, it's next door neighbor, Kenmore, what have you. And there's some information out there. Some of it was good information. But one of the things I noticed, the people that were rating, positive aspects toward this initiative, most didn't even live in the city of Kenmore. And so I have concerns about that. And so it's definitely something I'm going to keep up on. I'm going to get all my neighbors involved as much as possible. And I just truly, truly hope that the decision is really made by the members of the community who live here, who are directly impacted by this. And so that's all I have to say. It's just, I think it's deeply concerning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Andre King. I did mean John. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is John King. I'm a resident of Kenmore. I came home from vacation last week with my family and I received this flyer in the mail. Started walking around with my, checking my neighbors, next door neighbors, and they said they haven't received one. Started checking with other neighbors. I found out 1 in 10 of my neighbors received this flyer in the mail. Just from my experience, I'm a construction manager in the area. I work for Evergreen Health as a construction manager, and I have a civil engineering degree and a professional engineer. Blanket rezoning is not a good idea. It's been my experience that you want to do targeted rezoning. I looked at it, took a best guess at that landmass area you guys had. First glance, 60% of Kenmore is being rezoned by one initiative. That seems like a very hastily measure and should be rethought with more public interaction with that. I know in the city of Kenmore, there's a lot of architects that live here that work in Seattle, work around the area, and would have a lot of good free input to that. Myself as a civil engineer, I know there's other civil engineers that live in my neighborhood that would give good input to and do partial cut-ups all day long. There's public comment next week. Or not public, yes, public comment is Monday next week with a presentation on Wednesday. It just seems to flabbergast me that I, as a professional working in the construction industry for over 20 years, when I go in with a wrecking ball, I have to give notification to the other area, and I do that out of kindness. And I'm not required by a contract to do that, but once again, I do it out of kindness. And right now, getting the notification where I'm at, I don't feel like that's a kind reaction. I get a week to deal with this. And I'm dealing with this. I moved here to live in a single family neighborhood, to have a backyard, to raise my kids. With that, I did some quick research. For work, I have to do constant analyzation of costs. Hear you guys talking about costs back and forth with him. I'm curious about these guys, what the cost of regular construction would be. Cost of this construction is what's going to happen. I looked up the cost of townhomes, duplexes, and things like that. They cost anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million. That's not affordable housing. What affordable housing is, 5/1 housing, which we have right up here above Kenmore's, the Green Hospital stuff there. That's affordable housing. That stuff goes for $250,000 a pop. I just urge that we slow down on this measure. So we can have more public input on it and we can hear from us. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Gear Natland. I think that's a G. Oh. Okay, very good. Thank you. Chris Olson.
I am Chris Olson. I am also a civil engineer, although not a professional civil engineer. I have not yet acquired my PE. I recently graduated, so I still have another few years to work. I'm a resident of Kenmore. Before I lived in Kenmore, I lived in Bothell for, well, Yes, is this better? Sorry about that. Yeah. Before that, I was a resident of Bothell since, well, basically since I was born. I've heard a lot of concerns about how this will impact neighborhoods. And from my understanding, with the regulations that the city has explicitly written on that postcard that they have sent out, I do not see how this is going to significantly impact single-family neighborhoods. It's going to look pretty similar. The requirements that are put in place under this program are not blanket missing middle housing that you can just look up online. We are not talking about putting townhomes everywhere. There are duplexes and triplexes. They have height limits. They have space limits. They are not going to be larger than existing single-family homes. It simply provides additional opportunities and choices for people who do not need a full single-family home to live in a single-family neighborhood, and to do so at a price that is more attainable or more affordable, albeit still expensive. This is not a panacea. This is not going to fix the housing crisis. I understand that. It is a step in the right direction, and I just hope that we don't let it be the only step that we take. I would like to see higher zoning in some areas, especially between 65th and 62nd and 181st and 185th. We're talking about calling this RM for R medium, and next to it we're going to have transit-oriented development, which is between 50 to 150 units an acre. And then we're saying that's high density and medium density is 6 units an acre. That doesn't seem like a very good transition. I think we should be looking at and focusing on that a little bit more, having more of a transition where we have perhaps R18 in between the TOD regions and non-TOD regions. And also understanding that many of the areas in Kenmore, especially the ones within a half mile of transit options and BRT lines, many of which already exist and are simply being improved, are going to be transit-oriented, whether or not they are designated as transit-oriented. People will move there because transit is there. We moved here because transit is here. It is the same distance from where I used to live, but I can get to work in half the time. And that is because of transit. So I do think there needs to be more sidewalks and other improvements in these areas. However, those unfortunately are going to be incremental changes unless we significantly increase density, which I do not think, as many residents have stated, they want. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Serenity Dillaway.
Hi, my name is Serenity Dillaway. I've been a Kenmore resident for 12 years, and I'm here today as the co-president of the Moreland Elementary PTA. I'm here to express our concern about the lack of sidewalks surrounding Moreland Elementary, specifically on 81st and 84th Avenues Northeast. These roads either have no sidewalks or inadequate sidewalks, resulting in students having to walk along the side of a busy arterial in the dark to school or bus stops. No children have been hurt yet, but it's only a matter of time. We understand that resources are limited, but the need is significant. Many parents, myself included, have had to stop or stand in or near the road to stop cars from zooming past our children in the dark. I would like to encourage the council to prioritize these projects, specifically because hundreds of children are using these roads every day in unsafe conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. Quinn Wyatt.
Hi, my name is Quinn Wyatt. I've been a resident of the city of Kenmore for 40 years, so born and raised. I went to Moreland Elementary, and now my children go there as well. And we walk to school to and from every day, rain or shine, snow. And those specifically on 84th is where we walk, but 81st as well, where the entrances to the school are highly trafficked by young children, oftentimes dropped off, and there is no ability to really monitor those roadways. And so they're high frequenced by young children, and there are not adequate sidewalks to help protect these children as they're walking to and from school. These roadways are also used by a lot of high school students as they're going down to Inglemoor High School. And it's dark, as was mentioned, and it is difficult to see pedestrians on these roadways. And I know that is very important to the city of Kenmore to have 0 incidences involving pedestrians or bicyclists and cars. And we also know that these roadways are on your list, but they are lower down in priority. And because of the youth and the people that are using these walkways, we think they should be boosted into their priority level. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura Lotta, followed by Jacob Barron Talter, Erica Tidball, Elizabeth Mooney, and Dakota Rash.
Hi, my name is Laura Latta. I am a resident of Kenmore. I've lived here since 2010, so I guess that's about 12 years. I have a second grader at Moreland's Elementary School. We also walk to school. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's rain or shine. Sometimes if it's really raining, we drive to school. But we do walk, and we walk along 84th Avenue Northeast, where there are no sidewalks on a very busy roadway and bus route. I saw the pictures I brought were passed out to you all. I didn't take any time or effort to select bad pictures. I stepped onto 84th and I went snap, snap, snap. 3 quick pictures of crumbling curbs. And the most important thing is that the roadway on 84th and also on 81st Street is level with the roadway. And so we're just depending sometimes only just on white lines to mark where kindergartners are walking to school relative to busy bus routes. I know that this is important to the city. The council and the city have done an excellent job prioritizing pedestrian safety. And so what we're really asking for is to bump the sidewalk segments in the area within Moreland, not just immediately adjacent to the school, because North Shore School District provides bus service to students who are outside a mile radius of the school. So within a mile of the school, that's where you get your walkers. And many families are walking there, sometimes kids without adults, as they get a little bit older. And so what we're asking for is to bump the priority of the sidewalks in those areas. And so we're asking the council to direct staff to not only prioritize those sidewalks, but also to seek out some of the different funds that are specifically available for sidewalks around schools to help keep our kids safer. Thank you.
Thank you. Jacob Barron Talch.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. I moved to Finn Hill in 2003 and decided I would buy a home and raise a family in Kenmore because of the really welcoming and safe neighborhoods. Moreland has been a wonderful resource. I have watched the roads get busier as the neighborhoods have gotten denser. The transit availability is wonderful, but when the big buses come by and it's raining, there's a lot of water that hits our children. We're really close. I live on 84th, really close to the Kirkland border. There are some creative ways to create barriers between the traffic and the pedestrians. Kirkland has done something interesting on 84th, just south of 145th. There is more space and there is a new curb, and that's nice. It would be nice to be on a sidewalk. We'll keep our children more in line with where they need to be. So if we could look at prioritizing some of that safety for our pedestrians, it would be great to see. Thanks.
Thank you. Erica Tidball.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erica Tidball. I've been a resident of Kenmore for 11.5 years. Also with the Moreland contingent here to talk about sidewalks, because who doesn't think that's fantastic? It's actually a really important topic. Similar to my neighbors here, I do walk my kids to school. I've also recently started sending my 11-year-old out in the pitch dark to stand along that road at 7 o'clock in the morning when her bus is about to pick her up. She doesn't have a sidewalk, she barely has a street light. And as unfortunately, the delightful trend of really bright clothing is starting to wane for our kids, and mine goes to school in black most mornings. And so as you can imagine, it's a little nerve-wracking as a parent to be sending your 11-year-old to stand out in the dark where there are buses, not only school buses, but it is a metro bus route as well. Not saying that they're any less safe or anything, but they are big vehicles. We do often have to dodge rainwater as we jump away from the puddles as the buses and the big SUVs come across and whack us and drench us. And it's a fun adventure to go to school when you're drenched. And let's see here. Similar to my neighbors, I would also like the council to prioritize the sidewalks around the schools. At the very least, identifying it as a walkway. I will admit that we've had to dodge cars that have parked in the walkway because it is so poorly marked. It looks like a parking strip. It just simply does. And so it'd be really, really great to make that easier, more visible for others. I will say that the speed limit did drop this last summer. That was exciting for us. So that was cool. So thank you for that if that was you guys. But that's what I got. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth Mooney and Dakota Rash.
Hi, council and citizens. I'm Elizabeth Mooney. I've lived in Kenmore since 1995, and I'm president of PERC, People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore. I want to say that our nonprofits, PERC and Snow King Watershed Council, Lake Forest Park Stewardship Foundation, I'm emphasizing that because that city has not decided to get rid of single family housing like our city is almost on the verge of doing. And I talked to those people there. We had a wonderful Stream Fest, and I want to thank the What's Up folks for letting us promote the kayaking at Log Boom Park. So that's the thank yous. As far as the zoning proposals that you put out in this postcard this week, I'm a bit horrified. I think a lot of people are, but at Streamfest, I did collect a few comments, and I would ask you all council members, and I've talked to some of you, please go back to last week when Joe Marshall and David Baker agreed that we should have longer to discuss this. These people are coming in, they're just finding out about it. When I walk to tennis lessons just this last week, I met another person that doesn't know about it. Yes, we know that you've been working on this for over a year, and we respect you for that. But COVID stopped us from communicating. This is the first time I've been back in this city. And I came down here. I have other things I'd like to do. I came down to look at your faces and say, we care about the salmon. I'm talking with Chris. I'm talking with Dakota. But we need more time to understand why you think there's a rush. I talked today to a council member File. There's apparently something about federal funding. I'm sorry, I talked to Nigel. I want the rest of you to let us have enough time now that COVID is letting us open up and talk before a deadline. This was insufficient. Lori Anderson said this was adequate. You've heard them. It's not. And I'm not saying that I'm for or against it, but I do know people don't know, and that's not fair. I don't know why also you took it away from where there are buses. I collected some comments from people. How much money is at stake if we delay it? Weigh the costs versus the federal funding. This is just a few people. We need concurrence and infrastructure. It's way too fast. It's also dividing and confusing our community. Please delay this, as Joe Marshall and David Baker suggested last week. You know, it's got me nervous up here because I like you all. And I know that you're working hard, 12 seconds, you know, you got to delay it, please.
Thank you, Ms. Mooney. Dakota Rash.
Hello, good afternoon all. My name is Dakota Rash. I'm a resident of Lake Forest Park. I guess the first thing I'll say is, because I feel like my voice was kind of spoken for there for a minute, I don't agree with delay on this, at least for the missing middle housing. I think you all are making good efforts to approach a very difficult topic. We are in the midst of a crisis, an existential one. I've heard you say that language, the climate crisis. We're dealing with simultaneous increase in populations in certain areas and also land that's becoming unlivable. I know you all know that. I've said it to you. The South is drying up. More people are coming to Washington. Babies are being born. I also trust that you're not eliminating single family zoning. You're not going to go in there with a bulldozer and knock over houses and make duplexes and triplexes and those sorts of things. You're allowing something to happen. You're not mandating it to happen. That's how I see it. Perhaps I'm not the most informed, but I can visualize the environmental impact. And the way I see it is imagining I have, say, an acre of forest and I have 3 families to house. Let's say, for the sake of the hypothetical, you can only build something resembling a single family house. Does it make more environmental sense to house all 3 of those families in one house? Or does it make more environmental sense to house one family in one house? It starts to become clear for me when I imagine it that way, because as seen in the pamphlets, the buildings have the same environmental footprint. They cut down the same amount of trees, they lay down the same amount of impervious surfaces. Obviously, there will be a little variation with each individual house because not everything is built the same, but it generally functions that way. So you all have seen me many times advocate for the environment in front of you. I hope I've built a little reputation as knowing what I'm talking about in that regard. But just generally, I applaud you all for thinking about this because it's starting to work towards bigger goals. And I'm looking forward to commenting on bigger projects with you all. Affordable housing downtown, putting solar on flat surfaces. That includes parking garages if we're doing it. That includes buildings. That includes any new development. Maybe, for example, the park and ride. That could be something that could have solar. But then we'd also need to look at the heron rookery. It's considering a lot of different factors, and I trust from what I'm hearing that you all are doing that. It's resisting making blanket rules and looking at things individually for their ecological value, taking your time and looking closely. I hear that when I hear you all discussing this. I also very much support sidewalks, and I think of it in terms of moving away from cars being a default, because America is built around cars being a default and it makes things not safe. And so looking at sidewalks, yes, also looking at impervious surfaces, speeds, lights, that sorts of things, the whole package. Thank you.
Thank you, Dakota Rash. Mayor Herbig, we have no additional signups for on-site comment, but we do have 2 virtual comments. Can we proceed?
Yes.
At this point, we'd like to hear from Stacy Valenzuela, followed by David Dorian. Stacy Valenzuela, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Stacy Valenzuela, Kenmore. As soon as I read the consideration options for the presentation for Public Works project, it seemed very passive aggressive and strong-armed on one side. Why can't the city request the architects and developers to offer to do these considerations in the 1.5 acres as stated from the initial goal that building for the future was needed 1.5 acres? Would like to see the city sell the excess or build affordable housing with ownership to help pay for the project. The land was already paid for with too high of costs. There are not many public works employees. What work is contracted out that will now be provided by Public Works? Shouldn't this be sourced for 3 bids and 3 design concepts with the list of climate action plan goal needs to use the space efficiently? Then choose which bid and cost so that the best design and use of the property with saving trees can be chosen. It seems the clear cutting of Cedar Park Church that just turning the buildings could have saved trees. Will there be a public hearing and will the people be included in this process? Also passive aggressive with the statement at the last meeting discussion on missing middle rezoning in the comp plan. However, it's stated tonight, there is no need to rush to rezone the full property immediately, nor does Public Works or the new affordable housing construction have to be held up on the comp plan as threatened. But as stated tonight, if the use of per Plan B, that portion is already zoned for public use. The full property site has not yet even been zoned, but the comp plan can move forward, adopting the zoning submitted by the Planning Commission along with the transit corridor without rezoning for the missing middle of the whole R6 zone. This zoning determination should be made after all the other stakeholders are given consideration at the public hearing? Or has it been decided by what was stated tonight? The will of the people, Kenmore residents' concerns, and business concerns should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. David Dorian?
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear and see you. Go ahead.
Oh, great, thank you. I'm David Dorian, resident of Kenmore. I just wanted to say some words tonight in support of the radar proposal. I know that in the past, I've discussed in relation to radar about how there are other alternative models to have mental health providers respond to moments of crisis. I did want to say, on reflection and on reviewing the radar program as is being proposed now, I think this is the right move to support the program moving forward. And I did just want to say that. I think part of the hesitance that I've had in the past is around whether the program would be properly funded. And I think this actually helps secure that. I've also heard from people that are on the front lines, engaging with people that are in moments of crisis and trying to support them. And they speak highly of working with the navigators. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking to somebody, there was a family that was in crisis. They were homeless, living in their car. There was a call went out for people to see if we could find how we could get some housing for them, emergency housing. And one of the people shared that, well, you know, the way we normally do this in Bothell is that I would reach out to the navigators. So hearing that, I think the penny dropped for me around the value of the program, both in terms of the emergency response, but also building infrastructure between the various different institutions and organizations that we have here. So tonight, I would just like to say, as I know you're going to be discussing and hearing the presentation, that I would definitely support the radar proposal, and I hope that you would see that as a priority for our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Dorian. Jim Myers. Jim Myers.
Hello, can you hear me now?
You're very faint.
Oh dear. How's that, better?
Hardly.
Oh dear.
I think we can hear him well enough.
Okay, the mayor said we hear you well enough and we have a transcription going, so I think we'll understand.
We'll just
Go on.
go with it. Yes, hi, my name is Jim Myers. I'm a resident of Kenmore since 1995. And I'd like to comment on the rezoning that's been proposed. I do appreciate that there are ways that you can evolve from single family housing to duplex or other alternatives. I think what concerns me, and from what I've heard other residents of Kenmore, is that this is what we're leading with, rather than leading with, say, transportation infrastructure. It was pointed out, we are a nation of cars, and if people don't have an alternative, they will stay with their cars. And if you have a triplex, then you've probably got 6 cars, and you've got to put them someplace, and they've got to drive someplace, and they got to park someplace. And without that that concurrence of infrastructure, you will be creating a larger problem. I know there are ecological protections. I think they need to be strengthened. I think they need to be locked down. I am sure that there are developers who are going through and finding ways to game the system. There's a lot of discussion that's on the internet. In Arlington, in Virginia, there's a wonderful dialogue between people who are in the Sierra Club, who are debating whether or not the Sierra Club should have endorsed this. And I think what's most interesting there is the viewpoints and the things that people bring up. But I think unless we have the safeguards, unless we have this sort of infrastructure in place, you know, if we let the development genie out of the bottle, we will never get it back in. You can't sort of undo these things. So I say, move ahead with caution and with safeguards and assure that what you're proposing to do will actually do what you want it to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Mayor Herbig, there are no additional hands raised.
All right, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to come out and giving your input. It's always welcome. Next on the agenda, and this is the first time I'm seeing this in my 8.5 years here, is a consent agenda that is blank. So we don't have a consent agenda. Next on the agenda after that is the business agenda. The first and only item is Regional Mobile Crisis Response Expansion Proposal presented by Assistant City Manager Stephanie Lucash, North Sound Radar Program Manager Brook Buettner, Karen Reed Consulting LLC, Consultant Karen Reed, and Police Chief Brandon Moen.
We're just going to check in with Brooke and Karen to see if they can hear us. Perfect.
Good evening, Mayor Herbig and Deputy Mayor, members of the council. So we're excited to share with you tonight a proposal for expansion and rebranding of the Risk Awareness, De-escalation, and Referral Program, otherwise known as RADAR. And I have with me Chief Moen also for questions. And Deanna Gregory, I believe, is also with us, Attorney Deanna Gregory. Some of you know her. She's been helping as providing legal advice, as well as Dawn. So thank you for that. A team of us have been involved in working on this proposal. So what I'm going to do is go over some kind of key aspects of what the changes are, what the discussion is tonight, and then open the council for discussion and have, as I mentioned, many folks here to help answer some of those questions, as well as Brooke is on the line. So as you know, the RADAR program began in 2016 as a pilot program and expanded in 2019 to be a partnership via an interlocal agreement with the 5 North King County cities, so Kenmore, Kirkland, Bothell, Lake Forest Park, and Shoreline. And the Bothell team has been the lead agency housing the program. So Brooke and her team have been City of Bothell employees since the ILA was founded, and the program's been funded by MID funding. So county funds have paid for this program to this point. And the program is currently 5 days a week. And there's been discussion for a while now about expanding coverage because mental health crises don't just happen 5 days a week, and wanting to have better coverage and over longer hours. And so, so there's been discussion underway for a while, and the cities have come together and been talking about this for about a year. We've been having conversation. And there's also discussion about rebranding the program. Part of it is there's been some confusion about RADAR and it gets confused with some other names. And so the branding you'll notice in the agenda packet for tonight is the Community Mobile Crisis Response Agency. So that's a change as well that we're proposing as part of this discussion that we're having. And so 7-day-a-week coverage is a big change from the 5-day-a-week coverage, and then also having some on-call assistance, navigators available to help co-response with police in the evening or overnight hours. And so that is a 13-member team is what it would take to provide 7-day-a-week coverage. And in the agenda packet, which included both the agenda bill, an interlocal agreement and articles of incorporation, which we'll talk about summaries of those, but there's also a budget proposal for this, and you'll see that Kenmore's 2023 portion of the funding would be $171,000 for next year. So we're going to talk about that. There are also some insurance requirements that are needed and have been discussed, and the cities have joined together to write a letter to the WCIA asking for their consideration to change those rules. And there is a hearing in October where they'll be taking that item up for consideration. The city of Kirkland also, in the meantime, has created their own responder program in 2021. The idea we have is to merge the Kirkland program that's been rolled out with RADAR under a new nonprofit corporation under this Community Mobile Response Agency, the new agency. And that the city of Kirkland, instead of Bothell, would house the program, so hire the staff and be the fiduciary agent for the program. And there's a lot to this interlocal agreement. There are a lot of details, which, Deanna and others can speak to, and Dawn can speak to the nuance and details of it. But just wanted to let you know that this is a discussion. You're actually the first council. All 5 of the member cities, the councils will be having the same presentation and having Karen and the team come and answer your questions over the next week. And then to take your feedback, make adjustments to the proposal, take into consideration your questions and comments, and then come back later this year, October and November, for with a revised and hopefully agreement that might meet your needs for a vote. And then the idea would be, if this is something that all 5 councils want to do, all 5 cities want to do, it would be rolled out in March of 2023. The new nonprofit would be formed and the new agency would take shape at that time. So it's a lot more to it, but that's a summary. So, and I know that some of you have had questions already. We've been answering those along the way. So thank you for that. So would love to just open up for discussion. Tonight's a discussion only. So there's no action we're asking from you tonight, just to get a chance for you to get your questions answered and hear from some of the experts that are in the room, and as well as Chief Moen, to answer anything you want to know as we go through this process and get feedback from all of you tonight and the other councils as well over the next week.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I have more of a comment just to open. I recognize the good intention of changing the name. I'm just going to share, the new name doesn't seem any more clear to me. I think that the name needs reworking and needs to be more explicit about emotional or mental health crisis response, because that is what we're talking about here, at least from my perspective. We're calling in people with sensitivity to the needs of people in crisis. I think the word mobile isn't necessary. I really recommend going deeper into the name and making it clear what it's for, because community mobile, I can't remember, crisis response just has almost no meaning to me. So I just want to share that perspective. I think branding, naming is incredibly important. We want people using it. We want people who are reading what we're funding to understand what it is. So that's
thank you so much.
My feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you. I want to also voice that I agree with what Councilmember O'Kane mentioned. I think we get really familiar with acronyms, but most people don't know what they mean. So if we can come up with something that's easily recognizable, that's easy for us to refer to, that people, know what it means immediately when they hear it, I think that's really important. I did send I sent these questions to staff earlier, like very early in the morning, and they got back to me, but some of them I'd like them to expand on, and also for the council to hear them. So, I asked about insurance, the insurance loophole. If it doesn't get approved, I know you said that individual responders would buy individual coverage at about $900 a year, and we would cover that cost. Is that right? Okay.
That's correct. And that's happening now. They have to provide their own coverage.
Oh, and then we reimburse for that.
Right.
Okay.
That's what's happening now.
Okay. And then also, so in the packet, I think it mentions that in Kirkland's experience that their emergency responders have not been able to respond solo. And so what would be different about the CMCR model to allow them to respond on their own?
Brooke, would you like to answer that question?
Yeah, hi, good evening, everybody. Sorry not to be there in person and missing the first in person. I love it.
Hold on, Brooke, you're a little bit faint.
Okay, can you hear me a little better now?
A little bit. Try again.
Hopefully we can get good enough audio. Can you hear me
Oh,
okay?
it's good enough.
Okay. So to answer your question, Councilmember Kugler, the Kirkland program is not yet operational. So they have not reached staffing levels to where they're able to send any responders solo. But what it's referring to is actually independent of law enforcement teams of 2 mental health professionals. For safety reasons, we're never going to send an individual mental health professional out alone in the field without either a partner MHP or a law enforcement officer. So just kind of the distinction of a co-response team is a mental health professional navigator plus an officer, and then an independent community response team would be 2 navigators, 2 mental health professional navigators.
Great, thank you for that.
And the reason it has not happened yet is essentially staffing.
Okay, thank you. I think I didn't realize that we would be deploying 2 mental health professionals for each call, so thank you. And I was wondering about data about current call levels and demand for radar across all partner cities as compared to like current staffing hours and levels, sort of to demonstrate like the need for growth and expansion.
Current call volumes, I don't think we'll do a great job of demonstrating the need because we work to our capacity. And as our capacity grows, the number of referrals and the number of people that we can see grows. It may actually be more helpful for you and the other council members to see a data sheet that King County put together about the volume of crisis incidents in North King County. And it's broken down not by city, but kind of by region, and shows that there is greater mental health, behavioral health crisis need than we're currently able to meet. So I think that might better get to the answer of your question than the data I sent you earlier.
And are you referring to the data that was just handed out to us, or is there something else that you're referring to?
Yes, this is the same. Yeah, we just handed it out, Brooke, in person.
Oh, okay.
Hard copies of what you sent earlier.
That will show you Kenmore radar navigator response in comparison to the other cities. But if you're looking for the amount of behavioral health crisis need more generally, then there's a data product that King County created for us that I can get to the council members by later tonight or tomorrow.
Oh, okay, thank you. We just have 2 more questions, I think. So will the CMCR be located at a central location? How will you handle like the distance between like South Kirkland all the way up to Shoreline, all the way to Bothell? Like if you're getting calls from all there, I'm worried about the response time. So what's the plan for responding to that?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Under the proposal, Kirkland is offering to have an office space, but it's not my intention to have navigators in an office at any time. Part of the budget includes purchasing vehicles so that they can be mobile. And to me, it makes sense to have them kind of roughly stationed at either in the middle at Bothell or in Shoreline and Kirkland, but then really mobile and really at each of the 5 cities at some point during the day and during the week, so that they're getting to know the first responders in those cities as we do, and are really available and accessible. So there's not a very specific answer other than that their placement will really be driven by operational need and by staffing availability. So like if we have 2 teams on, I would station them in Shoreline and Bothell so that they have good response teams across the top of the lake as well as down to Kirkland.
Okay, great. And then also, this might be wishful thinking, but does the expansion of this also help alleviate demand from our Kenmore PD? Like, does it present any cost savings for our police and or savings of time that you can spend on other things?
Hopefully this is on.
Let Chief Moen answer that question.
Can you hear me? There we are. In terms of cost savings, no. Because in reality, the way we're staffed currently, having navigators able to go out and help us, assist us with calls, whether co-responding or going to calls solo, it's not going to alleviate the need for police officers. And we have So for you to begin with here that we're not going to be able to eliminate any positions. Now, will it free up time? Yes. To what degree remains to be seen, but certainly any time that officers are not tied up on say a crisis call that is manageable by navigators is certainly going to free up those officers to do something else, whether it be traffic enforcement or what have you. So there will be time savings, but I would not say dollar savings.
Thank you.
I have a story to share that I think will help kind of illustrate what Chief Moen is talking about. Within the last probably 2 years, we had a gentleman in Kenmore that had probably weekly 911 calls, either himself or other members of the community because of his alcohol use and his public intoxication. And navigators worked with him over probably 6 months and with his family to get him ultimately into treatment. And after that, yeah, he's no longer in a situation where there's repeated 911 calls about him. So not only is it a better outcome for him, but then it's a reduction in use of the crisis system for somebody that is having this ongoing behavioral health challenge.
And I was just going to add, that's where I've always seen the greatest value in radar, or whatever we call it, is that in law enforcement, we end up doing triage almost always. We're triaging, we're dealing with incidents at 3 a.m. where we're not going to solve problems, but we are able to hand off situations, people, families that need additional help that we're not going to be able to spend an extended amount of time with, and have a navigator do that, and have them build a relationship with them so that we can come to a long-term solution, which is ultimately what we want. And that ends up leading to less 911 calls, and everybody wins in that scenario. So.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yeah, I have a clarifying question and then several comments. So the clarifying question, which I thought I understood, but now I don't, is what is the staffing level that is proposed? Is it more coverage for co-response? Is it a team's worth for independent response? That'd be 2 people. What I heard a minute ago is maybe even more than that, 2 teams. So, I mean, those are really different animals. So I just want to make sure I understand what we're being asked for.
Brooke, did you want to answer?
Sure. There is a staffing chart in the packet that you received, but there's, I can kind of describe it like a bell curve of staffing, that in the middle of 2 shifts where there's overlap, there may be 2 teams available at kind of what we call the hottest hours of the day. And then toward the tail ends of a day shift and a swing into the evening night hours, there may be just 1 person on that would be doing co-response. And so 13 is the level with the supervisor and administrative support to get to the 7 days, 2 shift coverage that we felt was appropriate based on call for service data and mental emotional calls. Does that, okay. So it's a little bit of everything, Councilmember Shrubnik, depending on the time of the day, essentially, or the date.
So I do have several, thank you. I do have several comments, and it kind of relates to what you just said about, it's not clear, we're not clear on what the name is. And I come at this, I really appreciate this program. I worked at the county. I've worked on the mid-levy for several years. I was one of the, Brooke and I go way back, and I was one of the few staff that was actually funded by the mid at the county. There weren't that many of us. So I've implemented programs, evaluated programs, stood up programs under the mid. I'm pretty deeply familiar with it. So I come at these comments, I'm always trying to weigh what are the things that a city is uniquely positioned to do. In other words, what no other entity can or will do. Those are the things that cities should do. So, the MID is specifically, the Mental Illness Drug Dependency Levy, the MID, is specifically designed to support programs at the intersection of behavioral health and criminal legal systems. And this to reduce the likelihood that folks with behavioral health issues charges will cycle through the criminal legal system. Exactly the kind of programs that like Radar, and that's why it was originally funded. So I guess the first point I'd like to make is I really believe we should be asking, and I think we are now, for additional funds if we believe we need them from the MID. And I don't believe we need to wait till the renewal for that. I think they take interim requests. So my second point, Radar is a support to our police and to our community, of course, but it is a support to the police. And, as a city that contracts with the county sheriff's office for police, and with the sheriff's focus on, really ensuring that the most appropriate level of response is provided, I feel like we should at least ask whether they could provide this, pay for it, or contribute in some way. Obviously, we contract with them, we pay them for service, so it would be somehow built into our contract. Maybe we pay some, they cover some of the costs, but we should at least ask the question. I feel like the county, between the sheriff's department and the MID, which is under the behavioral health division, are best positioned to support a program like this. So third point, I just want everybody to be aware that the county, the behavioral health division, is separately investing significant funds into some of the components that Radar covers or is hoping to expand to cover. So, and this was part of my clarifying question. So Radar currently does co-response, goes out, with police, and they do follow-up on certain calls. Now we're talking about going out independently. Of course, that's a different staffing model, as we just talked about. So at this time, right now, state funds from the 988 implementation are allowing expansion of two of those three components, both the independent response and the follow-up. This is not a trivial amount of funding. And I just feel like we're going to be duplicative, and I'm really not a fan of that in terms of what governments do. So I would like us to stay in the lane. The piece that isn't getting expansion funding is co-response. So in terms of clarity, in terms of the ILA, our name, let's call it what it is and fund it at the level that makes sense, which is the co-response. And I think that would save us, it would be less money, and it would be clearer. So yeah, I guess those are my points. And, and again, making sure that the ILA follows what the work is. Right now, it doesn't even mention co-response. It only talks about primary response in sections 4 and 5. And of course, the name, as many people have mentioned, is very confusing. And it basically, what the county's program is called the Mobile Crisis Team, MCT. So, this is, it's, very close. It's got an M and a C in it. And, it just feels like it's going to be confusing. And again, I really want to support this program, and I feel bad about making these points, but I also feel like I can't not make them. It feels imperative to be a good servant of our community and steward of our dollars.
Councilmember Baker.
I have a question for you, Chief. We have a chart here showing individuals served, I believe, in Kenmore. 19, there was 25. In 20, there was 32. 21, there was 27. And so far, this year, I believe we've got 11 served. Is this per year?
I can probably answer that better than the chief. That's
Okay.
data about
Yes.
the Navigator program, individuals that the Navigator program has served during that calendar year. So that is correct. I just would have the caveat that 2022 data is still very incomplete for the first half of the year, but just to get an idea for where we're at.
Okay, and just another question. We seem to have a propensity now of changing meanings of words. So to me, a navigator is somebody who navigates a ship or an aircraft, or somebody that plots a course from point A to point B. And I'm wondering, in your definition, what is a navigator? Because I'm not quite clear.
Should I take that one as well?
Sure.
Feel free to tell me to stop talking. I can't really see the panelists' faces, so I'm not sure when it's appropriate to jump in. But in the way that we see the navigator role is exactly what you're talking about, council member, getting somebody from the point of crisis and navigating them to the system of care. So we're not providing long-term clinical services. We steered away from a couple of other potential names for the role because folks with lived experience told us that those names could be triggering, like the idea of a social worker, quote unquote, is often for marginalized communities as someone that comes in to take their kids away, for example. The idea of an MHP, mental health professional, is someone that in the past has been have had the power to take away their civil rights by detaining them. And so we settled on the term navigator for our staffers, even though they are social workers and they are mental health professionals, MHPs, because it's a little less loaded and it gets to the idea that we're really a time-limited first response, getting people from the moment of crisis, navigating them to the community of care where they would receive ongoing services.
Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall?
I do not have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember File.
Thank you. You know, what I love about the radar program is that it has taken a holistic approach at a, person-centered issue. And that often rolls into affecting families and neighborhoods and communities. So we used to have 2 officers go out, sometimes 3, depending on how big of a crisis it was. Now we have a behavioral health approach and a holistic approach with radar. And that's the beauty of a kind of a tandem relationship of a navigator and an officer, let alone the legalese that must take place. Originally I had questions about funding. There seemed like to be so many programs, as Councilmember Shrebnick had mentioned, that are new or have just been recently funded from the state level or county level. We have a new, fire-directed behavioral emergency kind of number you can call. And the question was, if there's all this funding, is some of the funding coming from this, like county pathway, or does any of it overlap? And the answer was, I would let you fulfill that answer because I think it's important for the community here. Ms. Lucash.
Well, and I'm wondering if Karen or Brooke also want to answer that, because we have been in these conversations for quite a long time. And I know Karen, we actually, and to the naming too, Karen, if you would like to share anything about the challenge we've had, and clearly it's still a challenge in what we call this program, I would welcome your comments on that as well.
You're on mute, Karen.
I'm not, sorry about that. I'm not sure I'll have a terribly satisfactory answer to that, but I would say I was engaged to help facilitate the discussion between the 5 cities to help them reach agreement on the deal points that are in the interlocal agreement in front of you. Working on the name was a struggle. Some folks felt strongly that we should keep the radar name because there's some familiarity with it, and the program has a good reputation in the county and in the area of these 5 communities. And others felt like we should signify that we're starting something new, and the radar name isn't terribly transparent, and there's a conflict with a software that the dispatch agencies all use, which is known as radar. So we have spent a good amount of time with that. I don't think we easily concluded that there's a perfect answer on the name. So the comments from you are helpful this evening. I'm sure we will spend some more time talking about it. In terms of the funding and the funding overlap, you are absolutely right that there are, the fire agencies are standing up these CARES units that are focused on the low acuity medical responses. And this program is more, it's sort of a companion to that, but is focused on police with more behavioral health crisis focus. And there are different funding streams for these, and this program has been fortunate to have not only the MID funding, but also grants from WASPIC. I think there's one other grant funding source as well, Brook, that I may be forgetting. At any rate, that remains an important aspect of this program from the perspective of the partners that I was working with through this effort, that they want to make sure we can continue to qualify for that kind of grant funding to minimize the impact on city general funds, and also just make sure that we can run a program that is at a stepped up level and is better able to respond to the demand that is in the 5 cities.
I want to take a crack at the funding question, and my answer is a little bit squishy, so please forgive me. But to Karen's point, we do have 3 funding sources right now: MID, WASPIC, and a grant from the Department of Justice that we're just in the process of getting implemented. But I am an eternal optimist, and I see the role of the program manager in part as bringing in additional funding sources. And in the case of expansion, additional funding sources that offset the cost to the cities. And so when I look at the budget proposal for expansion that's being presented to the cities, I feel a reasonable amount of confidence that there will be other funding sources coming in the next year and in the next 5 years, especially as we continue to show great results like reduction in jail bookings and reduction in behavioral health crisis events. All of the sources that Councilmember Srebnick and Councilmember File mentioned are exactly what's on my mind as well. Additional money from King County, especially as Executive Constantine is talking about his priority of reimagining policing across the county. So maybe that's not just MID, partnering with King County Sheriff's Office with the new sheriff who has specifically mentioned radar often in her public comments as a priority area. And then as 988 funding emerges, I see great potential to partner with the state on the way that they're rolling out that type of funding to support the intervention that we're providing and will provide in North King County.
Thank you.
And I will just add that we are in the process of writing a letter to the county asking to preserve the existing MID funding and asking for additional MID funding, the 5 cities, and that's in progress. That letter is being circulated and we've all been reviewing it. So that should be sent. And I think that's for our mayor's signature when it's ready.
Thank you.
I look forward to signing that letter. I just want to chime in really quickly and say that I firmly believe that this is something that we need to be doing. But like Councilmember Srebnick said, and some other folks, we do need to be hunting down other sources of funding if we can. Especially, I think MID, even, if Councilmember Srebnick thinks that we can get additional funding out of there before renewal, then she knows better than I would. I would love to see us pursue that because, again, this is something that the county has traditionally funded. And while we are increasing it, I think the need at the county level, I think the county recognizes that there is a need for this. We've seen that with the executive and his rollout of crisis centers, that whole discussion that he's starting right now. So I think the need is recognized, and I think we can make a really good case for the good work that Radar has done and the good work it'll be able to do in an expanded form. So, Deputy Mayor.
Mayor, I thank you for your comments. You may have stolen some of my thunder, but hopefully I'll be able to, I'm going to start light. I get really stuck on words and names. I did come up with something quick that may work. Like something along the lines of crisis navigator program or crisis navigation. I know you probably had that come up already as you were discussing it. I like radar. I'm just going to throw this out there because it relates to navigation. This program is about navigating the system and getting people the right support when they're in need. So anyway, just wanted to put those 2 out there, 2 thoughts about naming. I'm not going to belabor it. Yes, I tend to agree with, I think Council Member Shrubnik opened with this and what our mayor just mentioned about funding definitely belonging at a higher level place. These programs are critical and need to be more universal throughout our region and beyond, quite frankly. But this is incredibly important to our community, and I absolutely support this work. But the funding, I'm glad to know that the county and other agencies are working on this. That's the layers of work that are taking place since George Floyd. They have heightened our look at how we are responding to incidents. But I just wanted to say, I support and I'm thankful for Radar. I'm glad to know that you're working to expand the services to our community. But we as a region actually need to work on making sure that this is adequately funded without having to go to cities like ours is my thought. Thank you.
Councilmember Baker.
Yeah, this is just a question, a comment to staff. This graph that we've had, I only see 3 shades of green and blue and red. I'm colorblind. And the colors you guys use to make up different printouts, I just have a real tough time seeing. Just a request.
Councilmember Kubler.
Actually, I'm sorry. I do have a question for Councilmember Shrubnik. Is that possible with her comment? Okay, because so Councilmember Shrubnik, you mentioned earlier, like focus on the thing that we're good at. It'll cost us less. And I'm wondering if you could expand on that more. Like, what would we cut? Are you suggesting that we not do the partnership? That's what I'm.
No.
Oh.
So the 3 kind of things that I was talking about, one was the independent response, which takes the 2 mental health professionals to go out independent of police, the co-response, which is what they do now, and then the follow-up on those encounters, which they also do now. So what I was saying to focus on would be the things that aren't already getting expanded county coverage. So the independent response and the follow-up are getting a lot of additional funding that's being implemented. The planning is happening now. It'll be implemented shortly. The piece that isn't already getting expanded funding is the co-response. So a thought is if we want to invest some resources, that might be the focus, because that, arguably isn't getting any expanded funding. So if we needed expansion of the service, there wouldn't be an opportunity to have, there isn't an obvious existing funding stream. We'd have to go after it, like with the MID or with the sheriff's office. I frankly think all three of those activities, all of the activities, we should be, and it sounds like we are, looking for alternative funding sources.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. And then I also just wanted to share that, like, my support of the expansion of the program in general. I was looking for the email that I think Brook sent us like several months ago, maybe, of some of the successes from the Radar program, because they were very, very impressive and hopeful. And so hopefully, I think by providing the right response for the situation at hand, I think we'll continue to see some of those, improved results and treatment for some of our residents.
Any further questions, comments? All right, well, thank you very much for the presentation. Really appreciate it. Next on the agenda, staff report. Aquatic Center siting study update presented by Assistant City Manager Stephanie Lucash. And is Mr. Oppenheim joining, or?
He is, and this is really Garrett's show. I'll be here at the table, but I'll let Garrett give the update.
Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm just going to give a quick update on the Aquatic Center grant that We received word this spring that we're getting is actually 2 grants for $100,000 each from King County to do feasibility studies to place or to find locations, suitable locations for an aquatic center. Or 2 of them in North King County because we have significant need for them. One is for partnership with Kirkland, the other is with Shoreline and Lake Forest Park. Last month, we submitted draft scope of work documents and budgets to the county for their review. And just this evening, I received word from our point of contact with the county that the finalized contract for the partnership with Kirkland is ready, and I expect the other to arrive tomorrow. And so when that does, I will review that along with our partners and Stephanie as well. And assuming everything looks good, we're going to start prepping an RFP, and then we can find a consultant to do the work for us. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer those now.
Questions, comments? Councilor Marshall?
Thank you. Any real rough approximation before you get that consultant after the RFP? In other words, maybe how long?
We had set a timeline. Let me find that document right now and I'll figure out what that was. Sorry. I think we were hoping to hire someone before November, but let me just make sure of that. So yes, we were hoping to issue the RFP by October 1st and then to execute a contract with the consultant by the end of the year.
Councilor File?
Thank you. Just a comment. This is a wonderful that we're at this point and we've gotten this far. It would be so nice to be able to come back and have the wagon circle back around and have something for Kenmore, in Kenmore. And I know that these are shared site studies, but you know, I'm just going to put that extra plug in for Kenmore because I know our residents really want it. So thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Mr. Oppenheim. Ms. Lucash.
Your Honor, just one last thing on staff report is just a reminder of what's going on this coming Wednesday night, the missing middle presentation by Karen Perolek, 7 o'clock here or online.
Fantastic. Next up is Councilmember Initiatives. We have an item on here from last week to take a quick look at Sound City Association committee assignments. I think the real question is anybody applying for something different than what they're currently serving on or something new? Because otherwise we can all apply for what we're already doing. Councilmember Shebnick?
Do we know what the openings are yet? I haven't seen an announcement of that.
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten an email from Brian either.
So I mean, I will be. I've already indicated to my committee that I'm not going to continue to serve on it, but I'm not sure exactly what yet because we don't know what's going to be open. So.
That's our file.
Yes, thank you. I did send out an email to the council just during the meeting, so you could look into that. You know, not for a response, but for work here. It seemed like the standing record got linked to our agenda instead of the packet, but you know, things happen. So if you check your email, and this had been sent prior before, but what SEA wants to know is, are you going to apply for the same committee you're on now? And if you're not, they want to know that so they can, you know, share that information. And then 2, or if you're going to apply for a new committee or continue on, we need to get that verbalized so that we only have council members applying for 1 position and not 2 council members applying for a position. Otherwise, they'll throw both applications out, and it's good teamwork.
Right. I think what Councilmember Shebnick's point though is that usually, and it usually I think is a little bit later in the year, they do send out a list after they've talked to folks about with a list of here where we think the opening is going to be, and all of that. This that you sent us is just a list of. I mean, this is what was sent out early. This is what was put out in like January after they appointed everybody, and doesn't, I don't think, address potential openings at the end of this year. So actually, we might be a little, frankly, premature with this discussion at this point. It sounds like Councilmember Srebnick is not going to reapply for, is it the regional
GMPC, yeah.
GMPC? Okay. I plan on reapplying for affordable housing. Councilmember Baker, I know you're on at least one committee. Okay.
So sorry, into the microphone, please. Thank you.
I'm in line for the presidency of Harborview Hospital Board of Trustees, and so that's more important to me than the executive committee on Puget Sound Regional Council.
So your Board of Health appointment is longer than a year. Is that what I
beg your pardon?
Your Board of Health appointment is longer than 1 year?
Yeah, it's a 2-year appointment, I believe.
Okay, so you've got another year on that one, and you're not going to be reapplying for the executive committee of Puget Sound.
Yeah, I'm
Regional
not going
Council.
to
Thank you.
apply for the PSRC exec
Okay.
committee.
Okay. Who else is serving on things? Councilmember Fowle?
Yes, I'm going to continue on with the Hazardous Waste Committee, the Regional King County Hazardous Waste Committee. They've been going through a reorganization and restructuring, and I feel, compelled to help see them through that. And just additionally, the topic was brought up at the last PIC meeting about the opening of applications and wanting to get this done a little early. We have a new president of SCA, and some things are just opened up a little bit earlier than we normally have. So that's fine. Things change.
No, I'm just saying, we usually get an email from Brian or Deanna, who's no longer there, just with a list of possible things. to apply
Mr.
for.
Mayor, I
Yeah.
forgot. We are going to get a new executive director.
Yeah.
I'm part of the interview process next Friday. And I am looking at running for the board because there's lack of experience on the board, and being past president of SCA, I've been asked to, so I might do that, but just want to put that out there.
Okay. Well, I think when we actually get the list of openings, we should just double check that we're not, especially with Councilmember Srebnick, I assume you'll probably be looking for something to apply for, maybe, if something jumps out at you.
Yeah, I mean, if there's an opening either in transit or housing, I would love to get on, one of those two areas. I do have actually kind of another question, because I hadn't seen this in a while and realized that I think I'm supposed to be on the one that Joe used to have, which is the North Shore Park and Rec, and it says I am on it, and once every 2 months. Well, I think I've been on it since January at least, and I haven't heard hide nor hair. Was I supposed to reach out to somebody? Does somebody else let them know? I don't know. I don't know who to contact for that.
But
I
you're
guess.
not on the North Shore Parks and Recreation Service area?
Well, I mean, I'm named, but I've never seen any, and I mean, I
Right.
know you hadn't in a while either,
Right.
any announcement
Myself
of a
and-
meeting.
Yeah, myself and Councilmember File have been covering it. North Shore,
Oh.
that's North Shore Parks and Recreation Service area, or is this different?
North Shore Park and Recreation Board. Okay, so you're still covering those meetings?
The senior center. Is
Yeah.
that what we're talking about?
Oh, okay. Guess it never got transferred.
Yes, yes.
Well, if we
Yeah.
want to do that, I don't know who does that, but.
Yeah,
it
okay,
was-
so I'm
in
doing it and-
January, we decided to transfer that.
Okay, so I've been doing it and
Okay.
Councilmember File has helped out with several times.
Okay.
Well, maybe somebody could let them know.
Yeah, I think we can bring that offline and get that nailed down.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember reports and comments. Councilmember Baker? Councilmember Marshall.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
I also don't have anything to report. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. It's been an eventful past week. I visited Streamfest along with many others here. It was a wonderful event. It's great to see our partners and stakeholders connecting programming for our community and teaching and learning about salmon and water habitat and what we can do. I visited the brand new Faux House Deli for the grand opening and met Mrs. Nee, the business owner there. And they've been having lines out the door. They're just doing so great. Highly recommend it, and they're hiring. And I want to shout out to O'Reilly's automotive store who helped me put in my front lights because it was a little too challenging for myself, my headlights when my lights went out this last week. So thank you to them. And the new COVID vaccine is available in our area. For most, they have to make appointments with their physicians or for the Ostrom's pharmacy or our local grocery and whatnot. They're by appointment, but the COVID service centers of Costco for Kirkland and Woodinville are both appointment and walk-in. So if you don't want to wait, you can jump the line and head on out to Costco. And that's it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Nothing to report. Thank you.
And yeah, I went to Streamfest. It was fun. Ran into Councilmember File there and Councilmember Kugler. Appreciate PERC and their partners putting that on. And other than that, I don't have anything else to report. So the Kenmore City Council is now going to recess into executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)(I). The council will now enter into executive session to discuss pending or potential litigation. No action is expected. How long do we expect this to last?
15.
We expect this to last 15 minutes, so we should be out here at 9:11. Thank you. Council has recessed from executive session, and with no further business to come before us, the Kenmore City Council stands adjourned.